and welcome. And in this video, we're going to be talking about the quadratic formula, okay? Now, the quadratic formula can be used to solve any quadratic equation there is, okay? It doesn't matter if the solution is going to be real or imaginary, whether it be rational or irrational, it does not matter. The quadratic formula, along with completing the square, can be used to solve any quadratic equation. So when we're talking about the quadratic formula, we need to refer to the standard form of a quadratic equation, which is ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. Once again, notice this is equal to 0. That needs to happen. If everything isn't on one side of the equation, you first need to get everything on one side of the equation. And this is the quadratic formula. Opposite b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all divided by 2a. Notice how I said all because a common mistake is only dividing the square root by 2a, but that entire numerator needs to be simplified first before divided by 2a. Now, let's go ahead and jump right into a problem. We'll say we had this problem here, 2x squared minus 5x plus 3 is equal to 0. Right off the bat, I'm going to tell you guys that this is factorable, so solving by factoring would actually be the quickest and easiest way. But I do want to start out with a nicer problem that's going to have nice solutions, so we're going to do the quadratic formula. But you can solve this by factoring the quadratic formula or completing the square. Now remember, the first thing you need to do is make sure everything is on one side, 0 is on the other side. We already have that, so we can jump right into the quadratic formula. And I also like to kind of sometimes label what my values of a, b, and c are. A is the leading coefficient, so it's 2. B is the linear coefficient, which is -5. And c is the constant, which is 3. So what we're going to do is we're going to plug everything into the quadratic formula as seen. So we have opposite b, so opposite -5 is +5, plus or minus the square root of -5 squared, minus 4 times 2 times 3, all divided by 2 times 2. So I'm plugging in a, b, and c right into the quadratic formula. Now what we do is we simplify. So we're going to simplify what's underneath the square root, and we're also going to simplify the denominator a little bit. So it's going to be 5 plus or minus the square root of 25 minus 24 all over 4. Well, the square root of 25 minus 24 will become the square root of 1, and the square root of 1 is 1. So this becomes 5 plus or minus 1 all divided by 4. And then we can simplify this further by actually adding 1 and subtracting 1 to get our two answers. So if we did 5 plus 1 and divided by 4, that would get us 3/2. And if we did 5 minus 1 divided by 4, that would end up getting us 1. So our final answers are going to be x is equal to 3/2 and x is equal to 1. So the quadratic formula just requires a bunch of simplifying. It's really just a bunch of arithmetic. Can you square something? Can you multiply? Can you divide? Can you add and subtract? You can use the quadratic formula then. Now, I do want to cover one more example, and this one's going to be a little bit rougher, okay? This one isn't going to be as nice of a solution. So let's go ahead and take a look at that one now. So in this one, we have 4x squared plus 20x is equal to -45. Well, remember, in order to use the quadratic formula, and the factor for that matter, if we tried factoring, we need everything on one side and 0 on the other side. So I first need to add 45 to each side. And once I do, I get 4x squared plus 20x plus 45 is equal to 0. From here, I can now talk about what the values of a, b, and c are. A is our leading coefficient of 4, b is our linear coefficient of 20, and c is our constant of 45. So this is going to be a kind of big problem. There's going to be some pretty big numbers in here, but don't worry. If you use a calculator, everything will be fine. Now from here, we plug everything in. All right, so we're having opposite b, so -20 plus or minus the square root of b squared. So that's 20 squared minus 4 times a times c, which would be 4 times 4 times 45, all divided by 2a, which would be 2 times 4. And now we need to go ahead and simplify this. So once we simplify the square root, that's going to become -320. So we're going to have -20 plus or minus the square root of -320 all divided by 8. Now remember, when we have a negative underneath the square root, that means we're going to have imaginary solutions. There's going to be a complex number solution that has an imaginary part. So what we do is we pull the I out of the square root, and now what's underneath the square root is positive. So this is now -20 plus or minus I root 320, all divided by 8. Now you need to see if you can simplify that square root, and we can. 320 is 64 times 5, so I can actually simplify this to become negative 20 plus or minus 8i, because I can take the square root of 64 to get 8, so 8i, and then root 5 is left over, so root 5 all over 8. And then you got to see if you can simplify even further. Now, negative 20, 8, and 8 all have a common factor of 4, so I can actually divide everything through by 4. So negative 5 plus or minus 2i root 5, what's underneath the square root does not get changed once you simplify completely, okay? All over 2. And I can't simplify this any further, so that would be our final answer. If you really wanted to, you can also split this up into 2 fractions and simplify just a little bit more, but this is an acceptable answer as well. We're going to leave it as one big fraction, and that is solving by the quadratic formula. It's really not that hard. It's just a lot of arithmetic. So the more you practice with this, and the more you practice simplifying radicals, square roots in particular, the easier this will become. Okay, so that is solving by the quadratic formula. In our next video, I want to talk about this b squared minus 4ac real quick, because that's actually a very special piece of mathematics, and we need to talk about that just a little bit more. So I hope this video was helpful. If you have any questions, please feel free to let me know, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video.